In this screencast, I'll show you how to build a controller using pre-made buttons with assigned actions. To start, you'll need some buttons to work with. And of course, if you have your own buttons that you've already built, feel free to use them. For this tutorial, I'll be using buttons provided by Thomas, and you can find them on the Garden Gnome software forum called User-Defined Skins. Next, open an empty skin editor window, and then open the folder containing the buttons and select all the ones you need and drop them onto the editor window. Then choose Button. And you'll notice that when you do this, the buttons are all stacked up on top of each other, and so they obviously need to be rearranged. To make rearranging easier, adjust the editor window and then increase the grid snapping. I'm increasing it to 20 pixels so that the elements are snapping to every 20 pixels instead of every 1 pixel, making it easier to place the buttons. Now that they're all nicely laid out, use a container as a parent element to the buttons. You can add the container by selecting all the buttons and then choose Container from the Elements menu. When you do this, the buttons will be indented and are now children of the container and can be moved, hidden, and shown all at once. To be sure that the controller stays at the bottom center of the window, anchor it. To make sure that the buttons stick to their current position within the container, anchor them to the top left corner. Now it's time to make the buttons look a bit more interesting by adding a second state. States determine how buttons will look in various interactive modes. A normal state determines how the button will appear when it's not being interacted with. A mouse over state determines the appearance when a mouse hovers over it, and selected is how the buttons will look when the mouse clicks on them. The final option here is called Test, which is for testing your setup. Currently, the buttons have only the normal state. To add the second state, first choose the state you want to work in. For the mouse over state, I want the buttons to visibly change when the mouse hovers over them. So I need to have another image to represent this change. Over and selected state images are slightly, or in some cases, completely different. This adds a sort of animation effect to the buttons. The buttons we're using here offer different versions, gray, green, and red. I'll use the green buttons for the mouse over state. Add the images to the skin as a second state by dropping each one onto its corresponding image in the editor window. Notice that there's a green line surrounding the button. This indicates that you're working in a second state. You'll also notice that there are now 2 button images in the tree. Each image here represents a button state. Next, you can add a third state if you want. I'm using the red version of the buttons for the selected state. To see how your buttons will look on output, select Test from the States menu and simply interact with your buttons in the editor window. Now it's time to make our buttons do something. Double-click on a button in the tree or editor window to open the skin element settings. Go to the Actions tab and add the appropriate action to each button. For example, the left arrow button will rotate the panorama or object to the left when it's pressed down. So the source would be pressed and the action would be pan left. If you have an auto rotate button, the source would be mouse click and the action would be toggle auto rotate. Toggle means the action is turned on and then off and then on again and so on and so forth. You can think of toggle like a light switch. Once you've finished adding all the actions to the buttons, you're done. Save the controller, add it to a project, and test it.